In case you haven't noticed, there's a little bit of an outbreak of the novel coronavirus, also known as COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. Just to be clear, SARS-CoV-2 refers to the virus, and the illness that the virus causes is called COVID-19. From now on, for simplicity, I'm going to refer to SARS-CoV-2 as COVID-19 and vice versa. So, I know many of you are going to the store, you're stocking up, you're getting supplies. I know a lot of us are picking up cleaning supplies to help prevent the spread of this infection. But many of the cleaning supplies are sold out. If you're lucky, you got some supplies before the store ran out. Either way, we here at Out of the Doldrums have been wondering which ones are best and which ones will work in a pinch. Are there any homemade solutions? So, we did quite a bit of research, and here's what we found. First and foremost, as always, it's very important for me to say that you need to seek medical attention and advice if you or your family are feeling ill. The novel coronavirus is very new. It didn't even exist 90 days ago. Scientists are still nailing down the details of exactly how it is transmitted and how long it will live outside the body. What we do know, though, is that this coronavirus is very similar to other coronaviruses, namely the ones that cause SARS and MERS. That means that most of the information we have is based on research done on those particular strains of coronaviruses. Because not many studies have been done yet on COVID-19, we have to make assumptions and inferences. We'll have to assume that what will kill the other strains of the coronavirus will also kill COVID-19. And when I say kill, let's talk about a little technicality. Technically, you cannot kill the coronavirus. You can inactivate it or you can neutralize it, which would prevent infection and spread. So if we're to be scientifically correct, we'd have to refer to inactivating the coronavirus rather than killing it. So what do we know about the novel coronavirus? As of now, we know it's spread from person to person and people who are in close physical contact to each other. The type of virus transmission is called droplet transmission, which means droplets that come from mucous membranes like sneeze droplets, mucus, or saliva can be transmitted easily from person to person. Usually, this type of transmission is most commonly seen among people that are within 6 feet of each other. Scientists are finding that the novel coronavirus can remain alive for hours to days on surfaces, so it becomes very important that we make sure all of our surrounding surfaces are clean with no coronavirus on them. It makes sense, doesn't it, that cleaning visibly dirty surfaces followed by infection is the best thing we can do to prevent transmission of COVID-19 and other illnesses. Okay, let's take a step back for a minute and talk about the difference between cleaning and disinfecting. They're two very different things. Cleaning refers to the removal of germs, dirt, and impurities from surfaces. In other words, if the surface is visibly dirty, you're cleaning it by wiping off the dirt, grime, and other things. Cleaning does not necessarily kill things like bacteria or viruses, but it does lower their numbers and lowers the risk of spreading infection. Disinfecting, on the other hand, refers to using chemicals that kill bacteria and viruses on surfaces. By disinfecting a surface after cleaning it, you can further reduce the risk of spreading infection. Here's the thing, though. Not all agents will adequately disinfect or kill the novel coronavirus COVID-19. In addition, many of the recommended disinfectant agents are quite toxic to both our bodies and the planet. Lastly, with the spread of COVID-19, many of the recommended disinfectants are sold out. They're unavailable in stores and online. So we're in a bit of a conundrum. Hopefully, this video will help out as far as that's concerned. Let's back up and start with recommendations from the CDC regarding household cleaning and disinfection, specifically in relation to the spread of novel coronavirus COVID-19. They recommend routine cleaning of frequently touched surfaces like tables, doorknobs, light switches, handles, desks, toilets, faucets, and sinks with household cleaners, followed by a disinfectant. Keep in mind, many of these disinfectant products are quite toxic. You really need to wear gloves while you use them. You also should make sure you have a good ventilation in the area where you are working. So keep in mind that this recommendation is for any households, COVID-19 or not. However, if there's someone in your home who may have or is confirmed to have COVID-19, the recommendations change just a bit. If this is the case, you need to clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces daily in household common areas. It's highly recommended that the sick individual is confined to one bedroom and one bathroom, limiting or eliminating time spent in common spaces. It's recommended that, if possible, the ill person clean their room and their bathroom with an approved disinfectant that's shown to be effective against coronavirus. It's also recommended to frequently launder dirty clothes. And, of course, most importantly, you need to frequently wash your hands. Let's take a minute here and talk about hand washing. Good old-fashioned hand washing with soap and water. Does it work? Will it work against the novel coronavirus? Well, when you wash your hands, you're coating them in a lather of soap suds, and then you're scrubbing vigorously, and then you're rinsing. This physically removes pathogens from your skin. Fortunately, soap has been shown to incapacitate the SARS virus and other similar coronaviruses. These types of viruses have an outer coating called an envelope. It's this envelope that helps the virus latch on and invade new cells. We know that this viral envelope and soap have something very important in common: fatty substances. These fatty substances interact with each other, and when they do so, the envelopes get broken up, which incapacitates the virus. So basically, the soap renders the virus ineffective. There's no way it can infect a human cell after that encounter. What about hand sanitizers? Well, not all hand sanitizers are created equal. The CDC and World Health Organization recommend a hand sanitizer that's at least 60% alcohol in order to kill the novel coronavirus. So here's the thing. Many of the hand sanitizers on the market today are not at least 60% alcohol. So it's tough. You have to make sure on the label that the sanitizer you have contains that amount of alcohol or greater in order for it to kill the novel coronavirus. What if all the stores are sold out of that good old hand sanitizer? We're seeing it here on Maui. Well, you could just make your own. I wouldn't just use any online recipe though. Use a reputable one, like the recipe given out by the World Health Organization, which I'll link below. Basically, they mix 99.9% isopropyl alcohol, 3% hydrogen peroxide, and glycerol in a certain ratio, giving you a final product of hand sanitizer that's 75% alcohol. As a side note, obtaining 99.9% isopropyl alcohol is quite difficult. So if you can get your hands on some 91% isopropyl alcohol, which is readily available, you can use that, but you're going to have to adjust the formula appropriately. According to this research paper published in January 2020, the World Health Organization homemade hand sanitizer recipe was tested against the SARS and the MERS coronaviruses and found to be very effective. According to these researchers, they expect a similar effect against COVID-19. Another note on alcohol, just to be clear, spirits like the kind you drink
it's a party!
really don't have that high of an alcohol percentage. Most spirits are 80 proof. As such, that's only 40% alcohol by volume, nowhere close to the recommended 60% minimum to inactivate the coronavirus. There are exceptions to this. You know, if you can get your hands on a bottle of 190 proof Everclear, you just might be in business. So back to the approved disinfectants. After you've cleaned your surface thoroughly with soap and water, then you're ready to disinfect. There's a list of approved disinfectants from the CDC and EPA online. That's linked below. But even this list may not be completely accurate. As I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 is a new virus and we just don't know for sure. But these lists are based on data for harder to kill viruses, so they likely will kill COVID-19 as well. So ideally, it would be best to use a disinfectant on one of the lists that I linked below. But what if you can't get your hands on one of those disinfectants? Here's a few things you could do in a pinch. They may or may not be as effective at killing those hard-to-kill bugs, but given no other alternatives, they're proven to kill other types of enveloped viruses, such as coronaviruses. So like we discussed, COVID-19 is an enveloped virus. As such, there are certain compounds that enveloped viruses are more susceptible to compared to others. According to the Center for Food Security and Public Health, enveloped viruses are less susceptible to quaternary ammonium compounds. They're also less susceptible to chlorhexidine, which is a common surgical scrub we and me use daily. Fortunately, we have other options for surgical scrubs which are effective. The enveloped viruses are most susceptible to aldehydes like formaldehyde, paraformaldehyde, and glutaraldehyde. But these compounds are quite toxic. I don't know about you, but I don't like the idea of disinfecting my home with formaldehyde, a known carcinogen. So what's an effective disinfectant that's not quite so toxic? Well, alcohol compounds are effective, fast-acting, and leave no residue. Their disadvantages, though, are their rapid evaporation and they're flammable as well. While you can use alcohol compounds on your skin, unlike other disinfectant compounds, frequent use can cause skin irritation, dryness, and cracking. Also, like we just discussed, it's important to make sure the alcohol content is high enough to kill the virus, over 60%. Moving on, Clorox bleach is also an effective agent against enveloped viruses. Advantages with this is that it's broad spectrum, it has a short contact time, and it's relatively inexpensive. It has a few disadvantages though, like being inactivated by sunlight, it requires frequent application, it corrodes metals and damages other household objects, and it can be irritating to mucous membranes. The typical use of bleach is at a dilution of 1 to 100 of 5% sodium hypochlorite bleach, resulting in a final concentration of 0.05%. It's important to note that a dilution of 1 to 50 of standard bleach is what's recommended to inactivate the coronavirus, so it's stronger than the typical dilution. One important side note, never ever mix bleach and ammonia products. This can cause a toxic gas. It's actually been known to cause death. As long as we're talking about ammonia, well, ammonia has been shown to be less effective against enveloped viruses, so probably not a good idea to use that one. Another agent that's been shown to be effective against coronaviruses, hydrogen peroxide. It was shown to be effective with a concentration as low as 0.5% and an incubation time of 1 minute. Hydrogen peroxide is relatively safe, but it can be damaging to certain materials. Certain types of acids are also effective against enveloped viruses. Examples of these would be hydrochloric acid, acetic acid, and citric acid. Advantages of those acids would be they generally leave no residue and they're not flammable. Disadvantages are they're corrosive to metals, they need longer contact times, and the fumes from these acidic cleaners can cause respiratory irritation and be detrimental to lung function, which is kind of what we're trying to avoid in the first place, right? So, in summary, if you can, pick up a cleaner that's on the approved list so you know it's effective against coronavirus. If your store, or island in our case, happens to be sold out of it, try to get your hands on some high concentration isopropyl alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, or bleach. If you cannot get a hold of any of those things, good old soap and water will actually lower the majority of the viral load. In addition to chemical disinfectants, heat, light, and radiation can also be appropriately used to reduce or eliminate microorganisms in the environment. The use of heat is one of the oldest ways that we know of to control against microorganisms. And it's fairly reliable when it comes to sterilization. Things like autoclaves have been around for a while and they do a great job sterilizing. Things like autoclaves, however, they're not really practical for home use. We also researched UV light and sunlight as a means to disinfect surfaces. Many hospitals these days have UV lights in the hallways that lower microorganisms in that area. And even some surgical equipment is sterilized with UV light. So, we had to ask the question, could sunshine disinfect a surface? Well, the research is kind of mixed. While UV light has been shown to have a detrimental effect on certain organisms, it might not be practical. You see, UV light sterilization capability is limited on certain surfaces because of its lack of penetration into the surface. Some organizations like Columbia University have invented and researched a UV light apparatus that has been shown to kill virus particles that are floating in the air. Now, this is a commercial UV light apparatus. I don't think many of us have one of those lying around in our home or sitting in our basement. Also, some of the UV lights are harmful to skin and eyes. They can be linked to cataracts and blindness or some types of cancers. So doing something like laying in a tanning booth to kill any viruses on your skin is really not a good idea. There are better ways to disinfect surfaces. But at the end of the day, if you're left with no other option but sunlight, give it a try. It just might work. So there you have it. I'm Dr. Erminna Van Dyken from Out of the Doldrums, and I hope you learned some new tips to help you clean your home, thereby keeping yourself and your family safe. Please let me know in the comments below what you think of this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, stay healthy and well, and aloha.